yourself.
Yeah. Oh, the recording thing.
I forgot
So
to ask
hi.
everybody's permission. I am going to be recording this real quick.
Good for me.
I thought it was going to give me another box before it started recording, and it just started recording. So.
Well, there we go. Well, hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for welcoming me. My name is Laura Evans. I am a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm filling in for my friend and colleague, Mary Ellen Dans, who was originally going to be speaking with you today, but hopefully I'm a good substitute. If not, don't tell her. I am also currently in a role where I am a leader in a corporate environment, but one of the things I'm most passionate about is bringing mental health awareness into the leadership position in corporate environments that I'm in at the time, because I think that it's important to bring, again, the awareness wherever you are. And so I lead in a very similar way that I was as a therapist. I don't therapize my direct reports, but I do think that it fits everywhere, and it's a lot of the same skills in being a good listener and, you know, being empathetic and having kind of that servant leadership approach. So even though I'm not a direct therapist in my current capacity right now, I am very, very passionate about mental health in all facets of my life. I'm also a mother. My son's 14 years old. He just got his braces off last week, and that is probably the biggest milestone we're going to have until he turns 16. So I'm freaking out still. I'm really excited that this was a topic you all wanted to learn more about. And when Mary Ellen brought it to me, I jumped all over it because, again, it's a very close to home topic, not only personally, but professionally. And I just want to say that, you know, I didn't have a lot of time to put this together. I'm not saying that in any way, except for to tell you there is so much information out there. And so it was hard to edit down. It's also why I feel like it was probably one of the reasons you guys wanted somebody to come in and talk about it, because we are inundated with information now about mental health, which is a great thing. It's wonderful that everybody's talking about it, but how do you kind of quiet some of that noise and really focus on what's important? So today there's going to be a lot of information in the slides that I have, but I want you to just kind of go into it saying this is a great step, and that mental health, very similar to physical health, is like a muscle. You have to work it over time. And so this isn't kind of a one and done. When you go into it, think of one or two things that resonate with you. Walk away with one or two things that you want to start, stop, or change. And that's it. You do not need to retain any of the things that don't make sense to you. Some of it might be duplicative from what you already know. And again, just kind of try to think about it as a part of your journey and becoming more aware of how to recognize your own mental health in others, how to be supportive, and then especially how to be maybe more proactive as a mother, and how do we support our children and set them up for the best success we can, which we know is going to be a challenge no matter what we do. So with that, I'm going to jump into the slides if that's okay, unless anybody has any particular questions or concerns. I'm going to leave hopefully plenty of time at the end to answer any questions you guys have. Okay, I'm just going to get started. Oh, and I am going to show it not full screen. Then I'm just talking at the presentation, so it's going to just be in a way. If you can't see it well, please let me know, and I will do full screen, but that isn't what I was planning on doing. So can everybody see the screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So our topic today is all things motherhood and mental health. I already introduced myself, so we don't need to do that again. So these were the high-level agenda items that Mary Ellen had originally prescribed to. And so I am keeping to these themes, but the slide deck doesn't necessarily reflect these specifically. So we're going to talk about how do we talk about mental health, recognizing signs and symptoms within ourselves and others, and then how to talk to others about mental health, but specifically our kids and our family members, and then realistic ways that we can implement healthy mental health practices. And if you read my bio, I also have 3 dogs. If you hear them in the background, you know, you're welcome. Okay, so this is just a quick kind of why is this important? And, you know, if you ask for this topic, you know why it's important. But really, this has grown so much. There's more than 1 in 5 people live with a mental illness, such as anxiety, depression, bipolar, etc. But again, this is mental illness, and we're going to talk about this in a second. 1 in 5 have a diagnosable mental illness. It is far greater when you talk about mental health issues or mental health concerns. You're looking at 1 in 3, 1 in 4 easy when we're looking at the broader scope of mental health. So this is pervasive, and it is, across the entire world, but really it has grown so much more attention in the last several years due to the pandemic. Obviously, we know it's at least gained some traction, and we have better data on it than we used to. But really, this has been a problem for as long as people have been studying it. And there is a difference between mental health and mental illness, what we're going to talk about next. These are very broad, okay? But I just want to make sure that there's a distinction, because when we talk about mental health or mental illness, um, there's so much information out there, and I think sometimes it can be very confusing about what's a problem in the respect of this person really needs therapy, medication assisted treatment, etc., versus the what we would call in the therapeutic world the worried well, and then the spectrum of everything in between. So mental health refers to anyone's state of emotional and mental well-being. So mental health is the brain's version of your physical health. It includes typical fluctuation in moods and emotions, and we can implement day-to-day behaviors to create a positive mental health. We can be proactive. We can address it day to day with what we call self-care, right? Mental illness is very different. Now, you can develop mental illness from poor mental health, but typically there's a lot of factors that are both you know nurture versus nature. But mental illness is a much more persistent and severe. So they're conditions that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, or behavior. And again, they're pervasive. They occur across situations and settings. So, for example, when I mean situations and settings, somebody who is struggling with depression isn't only sad when they're at work. They are sad from the moment that they wake up in the morning till the time they go to sleep. There's other symptoms, there's other things that go along with it, but it's not just the feeling of being down or low that leads to a depressive disorder. It is across multiple situations, and we'll talk a little bit about the actual diagnosis in just a second, because I think it's really important to see the differences between diagnostic criteria versus the symptoms that a lot of us deal with and struggle with on a day-to-day basis, but that doesn't necessarily reach that level. It requires a professional diagnosis and treatment for mental illness. Mental health and mental health concerns don't necessarily. Okay, so talking about mental health, and again, we're going to talk more about how to have these conversations, but some of the concerns that people often have with talking about mental health are because of the misconceptions. So, one thing I hear all the time, especially when it comes to suicidal ideation, talking about it introduces thoughts that weren't there before. So, people are very nervous that if I bring it up, if I broach the topic, it's going to make somebody start to think about thoughts and feelings that they didn't have before. That is not true. In reality, having somebody bring up an upsetting thought or feeling like, hey, I've noticed that you're not acting the same that you normally would, or you seem a little bit more stressed out than usual, you seem down more times than you normally have. It helps validate, one, that they're being seen, but also that you may be comfortable talking about it. People feel much more accepted and vulnerable and able to talk about the things that they need to when somebody else approaches them, because people can often feel like a burden when they're struggling with mental health concerns. The other misconception is you have to be a professional or an expert to talk to loved ones about mental health. So I'm going to caveat this one a little bit. I actually do definitely believe in life coaching and all sorts of coaching and in all sorts of ways of bringing mental health awareness. But I will say that social media, TikTok, etc., reels talk about mental health in a way sometimes that can be very pop culture, very trendy. and sometimes mislead folks in thinking that maybe they're struggling with things that they don't have. On the flip side, it can also be very validating, again, to see mental health talked about in a way that reduces stigma. So we want to be a little careful about how we talk about it. We don't want to come from an expert stance if we're not a professional, because that might lead to somebody divulging information to us that we're not quite prepared or capable of handling in a trauma informed way or in a therapeutic way. So you just, again, the very general types of feeling, thoughts, behaviors versus acting as a therapeutic alliance or a therapeutic person. There's just a distinct difference there. So you don't have to be an expert, but you don't have to be an expert to also bring up, how are you doing? How are things going? Have things changed for you? Have you been feeling less excited about things going on in your life? All of those things are very okay, and you don't need to be an expert in behavioral health to talk about it. Mental health issues are a sign of weakness. I still hear this so much. It actually surprises me how much I hear this. I tend to hear this in very specific groups. Like I said, I've been working in corporate for almost 10 years now. I tend to hear it in people that are not very connected to the healthcare space. There's no judgment there, but I just feel like there's so much information now that's contrary to this, that my hope is that eventually there will be such reduced stigma that it will no longer seem like a weakness to not only be able to express our mental health needs, but that it is just a part of the norm, and how we are now really addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board. Mental health really needs to be a part of that, and my hope is that that isn't far off. Everyone deals with some degree of mental health at some point in their life. So that's just some kind of general basics in regards to talking about mental health. So recognizing signs and symptoms. Okay, so these are depression and anxiety. These are some of the diagnostic criteria for these two disorders. I want to be clear when I talk about this, because you're going to see things on both of these sides that you've not only felt, you've seen in others that people are experiencing. You may have had one or both of these. People you love may have had one or both of these, but we also get bits and pieces of these every day. And so, what makes it a diagnosable disorder is the persistence, so the amount of time that's in it, the pervasiveness, so across situations and scenarios, and then how it impacts your day-to-day functioning. So disorders impact people's functioning day over day. And it isn't what we experience a lot now. Again, us worried well folks, not taking away from that. I am one of them, that goes through the fluctuations of mood and, feeling disgruntled with our work and our homes and things like that. This is very specific. So for depression, if you look at some of the symptoms, the persistent sad or empty mood. So depression can't be diagnosed under 6 months of having these things. I believe it's at least 3 to 5 criteria for over 6 months. And it's loss is enjoyment of favorite activity. So we might feel sad a lot of the times, but then when we go and we hang out with our friends, or we go and do an enjoyable hobby or activity, we feel better. When you have depression, those things don't make you feel better in the moment. You might feel not as bad or not as alone, but you're going to still feel those kind of core feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness as you kind of continue about your day. And that doesn't mean that people aren't functioning. It just means that their functioning is impaired. Trouble concentrating or making decisions, which I think everybody struggles with right now, especially with everything that we've been going through over the last several years. But again, if you're looking at it everything in conjunction with each other, it is very hard for people with depression to come out of this and just kind of snap out of it, or live their day-to-day lives in a way that is meaningful for them. In the same way with anxiety is probably something the majority of us, and I'm going to say this because we're moms, and the stress that comes with being a mother can feel overwhelming. and can make us feel like we are not functioning well. So yes, it could well be an anxiety disorder, but unless it is impacting your functioning to the degree where you don't feel like you can even navigate your world anymore, it is likely not a diagnosis yet, but having symptoms of anxiety. So, a lot of it is the sudden feeling of panic and fear. So, panic attacks, there's actually panic disorder. So, there is a specific disorder related to that. Sleep related problems, numbness in the hand or feet, shortness of breath. A lot of this comes with the panic. Um, Dizziness, avoidance of situations. Avoidance of situations is actually a huge criteria for anxiety, because a lot of the times we're like, I feel really anxious in these situations, but somebody who has either a phobia or an anxiety disorder will actually not participate in certain situations and events because they know that their anxiety is going to be so debilitating that it's not worth the effort. And then obsessions and compulsions. So these are a lot of these can be broken down into actually distinct and separate anxiety disorders, but when they're all kind of put together, they can become kind of a generalized anxiety disorder. So this is just to give you a little bit of the disorder versus mental health. So what do we do? Okay, so if we're dealing with some of those other things that I'm talking about in regards to that, what I would call normative, normal is a kind of a non-word when we talk about mental health, but normative or typical, the day-to-day kind of stuff, that feeling of overwhelmed, running mind. Some days are just so terrible. I don't feel like I can do anything because I feel worthless and I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I don't feel like I'm doing enough for my children or my family or my job. I feel like I am not achieving my goals and my purpose and all of those things that I don't know about. I can't see anybody's faces, but if those are the feelings that you're experiencing, I don't want to say they're normative or typical and that you shouldn't do something about it, but they are also something that a lot of people experience and they aren't really sure what to do with it. So, what can you do about it? Mental health practices, this is a lot of what you would see in like a self-care, but I want to talk about a couple of these a little bit because self-care kind of gets a bad rap right now because it's like, oh, everything's self-care. Oh, I don't have time for self-care. But it can be something small, it can be multiple small things. And it's when I said leave here today with one or two things that you either want to start, stop, or change, these are the lists that I encourage you to look at, this one and then the one for children, that I strongly encourage you to take seriously and think about what you're doing and what you could do maybe more of. So eating habits. If you're my age or older, your gut brain connection really starts to catch up with you, and you might not be able to eat all the same things you used to be able to when you were younger. And I'm telling you right now, the effect it has on your mental health is huge. It impacts how we sleep, it impacts how we feel. So it really is important to be have a balanced 80/20 nutrition, because it does impact your ability to take on stressors and those strong emotions that we have. I'm going to skip meditation. We know what meditation is. Exercise and move your body. They recommend 30 minutes a day for 3 to 5 days a week minimum. If you aren't moving your body, it is going to be very, very difficult for your brain to calm down enough to be able to address the things that you need to address rationally, calmly, and in a mindful state. We'll talk about mindfulness in a second. So, moving, if I had to put something at the top of the list, moving around at the best you can. If you have any physical health concerns that limits you, working with somebody to kind of focus on the areas that aren't going to hurt you, because movement is going to be key. Social outlets. This is a hard thing for mothers to balance because we think if we're taking time for ourselves to be social sometimes that is taking time away from our family. You've heard this, but I'm going to repeat it. Taking care of yourself is taking care of your family. Your family wants a well adjusted. I'm not even going to say happy because happy is sometimes feels lofty. A well adjusted person, somebody who's taking care of themselves. And in addition to that, you are modeling that behavior for your family and your kids. So the way that you treat yourself, just like you are in your business and your leadership and however it is in your in what you do, you need to model that at home. And so, finding what is important to you and doing that. When I say prevention versus reaction, these are preventative. Okay. Reactive is I'm going to go to get a massage because I'm so stressed out. We do not want to self care when we've reached red. We want to self care when we're reaching out of green to yellow. So when we think about a stop sign, I want you to think about if I'm starting to like escalate and it's the buildup is starting to happen, I can start to feel those thoughts just, get overwhelming and I can't stop thinking about everything I need to be doing. I've gone too far. Doesn't mean you can't help yourself past that point, but you want to do more prevention than reaction. So taking care of yourself and doing these things is prevention. Reduce social media exposure. Just reduce social media exposure. Stay off of TikTok, stay off of Facebook and Instagram. What does this do? Instagram and TikTok give us comparison fatigue. We're watching other people on vacation. We're watching other people living their best lives, doing their dream jobs, making a lot of money, taking their kids out to all these wonderful things, packing them lunches that aren't realistic for a day to day. And we feel less than because we're constantly being exposed to unrealistic expectations and standards as parents, as working mothers, as human beings, as women, as whatever. Just limit it and you'd be amazed. If you go on a strike from your social media for a little bit, you will start to feel lighter. I guarantee it. I've gone on multiple social media strikes and I try to limit it continually today. That's another one. Exercise and reduce social media. Write and journal just helps you get out some of those overwhelming thoughts, those overthinking, obsessive thoughts that we get. Hobbies, same thing with social outlets. Find something that you enjoy. Routines. A lot of you probably already have routines, but when we think about the reason I brought it up here is when we think about all of these things, you're probably sitting here going, oh my gosh, I need to start this. I need to do this. Um, the book Atomic Habits, if you haven't read it, talks about the concept of habit stacking, and it's a 1% change. So think of something you already do. If you wake up and you go downstairs, the first thing you do is have your cup of coffee. What habit do you want to start that you can match up with that cup of coffee? Is it having a conversation with a friend in the morning to get that social aspect of your life, done right away? Is it meditating for 10 minutes? Is it exercising for 30 minutes? Is it spending some quiet time with no phone, no outside noise or distractions that just helps you center? And then when you connect it to something you're already used to doing every single day, it allows you to adopt that habit quicker. So that's why I put that in there. And I do just want to talk 1 second about mindfulness because mindfulness feels like a very fluffy concept to a lot of people and it's very oftenly akin to meditation. Mindfulness is just the act of being present in the moment. If you are like me and every other working woman and mom I know, it is very hard to be mindful because your brain is 20 steps ahead all the time. You are thinking about schedules. You are thinking about childcare. You are thinking about what you need for dinner. You are thinking about how I need to prepare for this new milestone in my child's life. I need to be this. I need to be this. And being mindful is saying, this is all I have in front of me right in this moment. This is all I'm capable of doing. I'm going to do this one next step. It is easier said than done, and I recognize that. But if you're going to look into something, mindfulness is going to be what I'm going to encourage you to look into as well, because it is just the act of taking yourself out of the future, which is also where anxiety lives, is in the future, and going too far ahead at things that are out of our control, and then bringing it back to the present moment. There are a lot of techniques and grounding tools that you can use to do that. One of them is observations. So looking around your space and just naming 5 items, looking for 5 blue things. And what it does is it tricks your brain into being in the future and then being present in the moment. And again, Very simple, and we're rushing through it, but we don't have a lot of time and we still have to talk about kids. So also, get sleep. There's a new study out that says women actually need 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night. If you're not getting that, I understand you have children, but the 8 hours of sleep was actually done studies on men. So we actually need 9 to 10 hours of sleep. So get your sleep and your fresh air, sunshine in Rochester when you can. Okay, for your kids, there is a blend here. Some of them are repeats from ours, and there's also a blend of what you can do and what they can do for themselves. I know that you guys have kids ranging from babies to teenagers. So think of this proactively for things that you can do, and just think of, I'll try to do as age appropriate as possible, but obviously you can do a lot of these in different ways. So eating habits, I'm sure you know the balance there, but I don't know about you. My nephew only eats snacks. I know lots of kids that only eat snacks. They'll be fine. Don't worry about it too much. Just try to, introduce what you can to them. I know that that was always stressful for me as a mom when my son was little, but do your best to kind of balance that. Hobbies. For my son who's now a teenager, I've noticed that a way that I can relate to him that took me a while to get there, and this might sound obvious, is for me showing an interest in his hobbies. I don't really understand video games. I don't want to play them. I don't have the patience for them, but he loves them so much. And so I have found that if I want to have a conversation with my son, or if I want to connect with him so he feels open to me, I have to sit and show an interest in what he wants to say, even if I don't know what he's talking about. And even if I'm just sitting there going like, yeah, but showing an interest helps him feel open to talking about those other things. Going for walks together, doesn't matter what age you are. Again, this models the healthy behavior. It also, as they get older and more communicative, allows them to feel, again, freed up to have those kinds of conversations that you might want to have, because it takes pressure off of, we're sitting across the table from each other, we're sitting across from each other, and we're going to have this deep conversation about what's going on in your life. It allows for some, one, your brain frees up when you exercise, but it also releases that pressure of kind of zoning in on the person. You can do this with anybody. If you're talking about a family member or a friend or a child, having some sort of activity together, especially like walking or exercising, is a really good tool because it opens people up. Social outlets, getting your kids involved early with relaying to other people is really important. Checking in. You can start this at any age. Even if they can't tell you back, you can start asking the questions. Make time to ask how they're doing. Give them your undivided attention. Take away any distractions from them the best that you can. Sometimes when kids are really young, it might actually be helpful to have something in front of them like drawing or like a puzzle or something like that, that they can both communicate but also have a level of their busyness being taken care of. And then simply ask them, how are you doing? What's going on in school for you right now? Are you sitting with anybody when you go to lunch? Are you feeling like an outsider ever? Are you feeling comfortable talking to me or somebody else in your life about how you're feeling? Do you ever feel overwhelmed by your feelings? Again, the more we talk about it, the more comfortable it becomes asking the questions. And then the more comfortable they will eventually become answering them directly. Healthy social media and screen time habits. I probably don't need to tell you this. One of the reasons our kids are having so much trouble now is because of social media and screen time. I'm going to say this, it sounds like I'm preaching to you. My son spends way too much time on social media and playing video games. I have accepted that it's a part of his social outlet, and that is how a lot of kids communicate now. And I don't want him to be necessarily different and things like that. And that's where we tend to struggle. But it just needs to have a balance. So there's a lot of things that you can introduce to limit it, such as, during these times of day, during dinner, during whatever, when you're outside of the house, just kind of limiting. It is a tool as moms. We need it sometimes. I don't want you to feel guilty about utilizing it. it isn't going away. Okay. Everybody has it. So please don't feel guilty using it. Just try to introduce that balance. And then also, as your kids are aging, teaching them healthy habits about it, and that there's going to be things that they see and hear that are uncomfortable, that people are much more abrasive on social media than they are in person. But I mean, bullying is bullying. And so people are just finding unique ways of doing it now. And social media, unfortunately, is one of those forums. The more you talk to your children and family and whoever, the less of an impact all of these negatives on their life are going to have, because support is the number one thing that helps people with mental health issues, mental health disorders. Their support system is by far the biggest factor in what helps them fight against the negative symptoms or the negative impacts. So we have to talk about social media if we're talking about kids. Drawing and writing. When I say monitor reactions to them sharing, this is a personal thing. So um, my son has tested me several times in my life at telling me things that have shocked me, either about himself or others. And I have learned painfully that I need to be very careful about my initial reaction. Your internal reaction, don't judge it. We all have judgments, okay, in our minds that are our first responses. The outward reaction is what I want you to monitor, because they sometimes test us in ways that are looking to see how we'll respond. And so if you just kind of shut down whatever happens inside for a moment, and just keep yourself open to what they have to say, and then ask open-ended questions, are very responsive and supportive, it allows them to see that as they get older with some of those more serious things that they're going to bring to you or could potentially bring to you, what the safety is going to be like. Because as moms, a lot of the times our gut reaction is to be, no, that's not what I want you to do. I don't want you to hang out with that person. I don't want you doing those kinds of things, because we feel very protective, and it can shut us down, and it can like raise our cortisol levels to hear these kinds of things. And I just encourage you to think about monitoring it. I'll give you a personal story that's a little uncomfortable for me, but just to give you an example. I was an addiction therapist for some time prior to kind of transitioning into some of my later roles. So I know a lot about drugs and alcohol. And I found something in my son's room that I was 100% convinced was drug paraphernalia. Okay. And I even told myself, you know what this is because you were an addiction therapist. And I called my husband and I said, I found this. He was with him at the time. They weren't in the house. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? I was like, just wait till he gets home. We'll approach it when he gets home. And then I called my sister, and I'm losing my mind. And my sister goes, this is one of those moments, Laura. This is where you're going to have an opportunity to show him what kind of mother you want to be. This is a pivotal moment where your reaction is going to determine how he comes to you about things as he gets older. You want to be an open person. You want him to feel safe coming to you. And so that changed how I approached the whole thing. And I just said, I found this. I sent him a picture. I said, this is an opportunity for you to be honest. I just want to have a conversation about it, etc. Well, turns out it was actually something that belonged in a science project, that it was completely validated. And I was very surprised, and also gutted, because I didn't trust my son first. And also that I was wrong. That was kind of a blow to my ego. But it was pivotal for me, because the way that I handled it after kind of diffusing it for myself allowed him to feel more, even though I accused, he felt more comfortable. And it's something we even joke about now. And I continually bring up, and I have since he was young, talk about mental health, drugs and alcohol, things like that, to let him know that it's a safe space to talk about it in our home, and that it's normal. There's a lot of people that do it. He's going to start seeing it at a certain age. And then this is what it looks like. This is how it affects people. And then also that, if you make things taboo and only abstinence based, everything, mental health conversations, feelings conversations, drugs and alcohol, etc., they will not feel comfortable talking about it. So you need to start getting comfortable talking about it too. Routines, knowing what's expected in their day to day is obviously key for being proactive and preventative in mental health. If you have a very volatile work schedule or things like that, then you can have a couple simple things be routine. The before bed or whatever it is, just picking a couple things helps them know that there's a safe space where they know what to expect. And those typically can become the times that they become more open to talk about things that maybe are affecting them. And then sleep and sunshine and fresh air is the same for everybody. So, what can you do? Okay, what can you do? This is kids, this is your friends, family, etc. Reach out and let them know that you're available to help or to talk. Being a person that somebody can talk to is so crucial and critical. And in order to show them that you're safe, again, it's showing up as non-judgmental, non-biased, and letting people know you're comfortable having those conversations. Helping them access mental health services, that one's a little tricky if you don't know how. I'm going to give you a couple keys. 988 is now a resource that is national for crisis intervention, mental health support services. It's something that people can call if they don't know where else to go. But if people are looking for a therapist or a provider or psychiatrist, if you go to Psychology Today, they have listings based off of what you're interested in talking about. If you have a preference on female or male providers, what your insurance is. So, Psychology Today is an excellent resource if you're looking for therapeutic supports and services. Help them learn self-care and coping techniques. Those two slides that we talked about, yourself and your children, that's self-care. Okay. And those are coping skills too. Listening to music, going for walks, etc. There's so many. And the more you become comfortable with understanding it, the more you can talk about that with others. Learn and share, facts about mental health, especially if you hear something that isn't true. So, what I mean by something that isn't true is there's a lot of mislabeling out there now, especially because of social media. Everything is now a condition, a symptom, a diagnosis, etc. Everything's, a trigger, things like that. Just if you hear somebody talking about mental health in a very flippant kind of way, it's okay to just say, hey, this is what I heard. What do you think about this? And just kind of having an open conversation about it. Make sure they have downtime. So, this is specific for your kids. When you feel like, I don't know what to do, I feel like I need to have them be busy all the time so they don't have time to feel down, or they feel they don't have time to get into trouble. That does not allow for time to be mindful, to just rest their brains. Kids do not need to be overproductive and always striving for that kind of like perfection in our schedules and what we do and how we perform leads to type A perfectionism, which most of us have. And that's okay. And we're all dealing with it and we're fine. But just allowing for that downtime and just nothingness really does help build that idea in our brain as we get older that downtime is okay and that it's okay to nurture ourselves. Create a judgment-free zone, an open communication environment at the home. The home should be a safe spot. So if they know that there's no judgments in the house, it's much easier for them to at least feel like, okay, I can be myself. If I need to talk about something, I can. If not, communicate with their teachers, communicate with other trusted loved ones in your family. So if you've got aunts, uncles, cousins, family members that your children or somebody else feels more comfortable talking to, support and nurture that. Say, it's okay that you don't feel comfortable talking to me. Would you rather talk to Aunt so and so? Would you rather talk to your cousin? As long as they're talking to somebody, it's okay. We do not need to be the end all be all. and then help them learn that mental health does not define us or our future. This is one of the reasons I struggle with a lot of what goes on in social media right now in regards to the labels, because we tend to think of it as my anxiety, my depression, my OCD. When you think about attaching yourself to something like mental health in that way, in one way it can be liberating because it's like I know what's going on, but in another way it can actually serve as a barrier to us because we feel like I have this, it's mine. So you don't see yourself outside of that, and so you don't challenge yourself to be able to overcome some of the things that are honestly very overcomable, because we attach ourselves so closely to how they bring us down. So those are some things that you can do. And then the last slide here is just prevention and what prevention can do when you are proactive about mental health for yourself, children, etc. So I told you I was going to rush through this a little bit in the beginning because I do want to allow time for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can talk a little bit more. And then the only thing I do want to say before we get into any questions is I like to create what's called like a psychologically safe environment. In order to do that, and with a group in this forum, you guys, haven't met me before. I don't know the dynamics of this group. I'm going to say that whatever questions you have, please keep them broad and generic. And what I mean by that is you may very well be going through it. You might have a very specific situation that you want feedback on. Happy to take it offline or happy to introduce you to the supports and services that you need or want. In a forum like this, we don't know what other people are struggling with or what people are anxious that could be being brought up. So I would just say if you have questions, just keep them a little broad. Like I know some, what would you do in this situation or what would you encourage somebody to do here versus this is my very specific struggle. Just that keeps it safe and that keeps it high level. And that way we can kind of cover more kind of different areas as well. So, okay. Thoughts and questions.
I'll just start. I just wanted to thank you for the time and information. Like I feel like you said, the mental health conversation for some reason the last month especially has just been all over in my space, which has actually been good and needed for me with things going on in my life. But I also wanted to jokingly say, I feel your pain. I have a 14-year-old boy too. Is it middle school grand?
Ooh, get a hold of me. I need somebody to commiserate with. But yes, absolutely. Totally feel your pain as well.
But thank
Yeah,
you. No
absolutely.
specific question. Just really, really helpful. I always take little nuggets. I've written like 4 things down that will be really helpful with each of my 2 boys. So thank you.
Well, good luck. If you've learned
Yes.
anything, please loop back as well.
Yes.
Also, I'm a therapist, so I'm really comfortable with long silences.
Do you have any advice if there's like mental illness in a family or like friends or anything, how to speak to young kids about that and kind of introduce those concepts to them?
Oh, interesting. Okay. So let's say you have a close family member that's struggling with a very noticeable mental health disorder such as depression or I would even say like a schizophrenia or one of those kinds of things where it's very obvious that they don't behave or act in the same way as maybe other family members do. Depending on everything's age appropriate, right? But transparency is key. So have those conversations early and often. Ask if they have questions, right? Or if they bring up questions, the way that we can answer them is everybody is made and built differently, and everybody struggles with different things that we don't necessarily know about or see. Mental health is something that shows differently no matter who it is. So while it's very helpful to educate on specific diagnoses, it can come out very differently. So if we learn about, let's say, autism spectrum, okay, for example, a lot of people think of autism spectrum as somebody being antisocial, very creative, and into one specific thing, and then also very withdrawn, but also maybe very talented, very sensitive. While that can be true, there's a variety of different ways that it can present. So when we talk to, let's say, children about this, we can say, what have you noticed that's different? What do you have questions about? What do you think is different about you or me? Or maybe even sharing something about yourself that you feel like is vulnerable or different that they might not be able to see. I process information differently than dad does or mom does. And, this is how we handle situations differently. And your cousin or your sister or whoever is going to also be handling information very differently too. But they love, in their own way, they love us and we love them no matter what. And as we get older, you'll be able to continue to understand this better and better. But all we need to know is that everybody has their own stuff and everybody is a little bit different. And, just kind of keeping it age appropriate, but very okay to talk about. And I think that that's where people get scared, is that, oh, we don't want it to seem like something's different. Or what if we mention something and the kid blurts out something in front of the person and then it seems strange. Another thing too, depending on the person's mental health that we're talking about, who they are, how affected they are by their mental illness, you can have a conversation with them about it too and say, how would you like me to approach this with them? Would you like to have a conversation with them about your experience? If they brought it up to you, or I would like to have a conversation with them because they're curious. So if they bring it up to you, just know that we're talking about what that looks like for you. There's a lot of different ways you can handle it. And it is very specific to what the condition is, how severe it is, and what, whether they're at a baseline or they're in a state of, if it's psychosis or whatever, and then the age range of the child.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
I wish I took a screenshot of it, but I really liked on one of your first slides, you had, there's a misconception of we shouldn't, how was it? We shouldn't talk about it. But it was actually saying like, it is okay to talk about it, because I think that's something that, I see a lot, and it's like, do I bring it up? Do I wait for him to bring it up to me? And, like, I like asking questions. I try to do that a lot, of like, what's going through his mind. But I think I guess that's always my struggle, is, do I bring it up or do I wait? Like the proactive versus reactive when you see something. Like if you see someone acting odd in a store or wherever you are, like.
So this is how I approach everything: mental health, relationships, everything. Communication. The more scared we are of having those, and that's normal. For one, it's very normal to not want to bring stuff up. But even, let's take the mental health aspect out of it. If we're struggling with, let's say, our spouse, significant other, or somebody in our life, how hard is it for us to bring up that we're struggling with something? It's so hard. But it doesn't do us any good or the other person any good to keep it in our heads. And we're only typically making assumptions at that point. We're making assumptions about their experience, how they're going to react if we bring it up. And so clear is kind, as Brene Brown says. So for me, the worst thing you can do is try. If you find that a certain way of bringing something up bothers somebody, again, everybody's different. So if you're like, I tried it this way, and they kind of shut down when I asked them like that, then another way that you might be able to do it in the future, once things have kind of settled too, is say, I think about this sometimes. I would like to approach you sometimes and ask you questions about it. I don't know how to do that in a way that would make you feel comfortable. So can we have a conversation about this? Because I want to be there for you. I love you and I care about you. So is it helpful if I bring it up in the moment? Or is this something that you think we need to wait until we've gotten home or we're in a different situation? Because I want to make it so that you're comfortable, but I also have a need to have a conversation about this too. And again, age appropriate really depends sometimes. But also, even if our kids are young, even if they're not fully comprehending these things yet too, it's okay to start with that. And then as they learn to communicate, they're used to hearing these words from us and they become more comfortable as these concepts become more concrete for them. So there's a couple different ways that you can angle it, but trying different things is always better because again, you're showing you're coming from a place of love and empathy, and that very rarely gets shut down completely. Sometimes in the moment it does because people aren't ready to receive, but you're showing that person I care and I'm thinking about this and I want this to come across in the best way possible. And I know that you're coming from a good place. People can always tell when it's coming from a good and authentic place.
I'm going to ask a very dumb question.
No dumb questions.
How do you know what's age appropriate? Like for my 4-year-old, if I want to just talk and explain, but he's little, so I understand I can't explain big things, but what's appropriate? And then at the 6 to 8 level, like I don't know. And I'm a very open, but I don't want to be too open that it's scary and hurtful. And yet I don't know I don't know.
So if you think, one, every kid's different too. So age appropriate and kid appropriate. So everybody's different. The way that I would say it is as much information as you can share to the point where it feels like it is crossing that line. And this is a gut thing. And I know that that's difficult. But for example, when my son was young, it would be things like if he would ask me, why is so and so like this, or if they're asking me a certain question, or if he was the one struggling, let's say, the conversations we would have would be much more of, I know you're having really, big feelings right now, and I want to be here for you. I also have really big feelings. I know that I don't show them all the time. It's okay to show them, but when we're in this situation, I am going to intervene sometimes. I am going to say, let's go outside and sit down. And I'm going to work on breathing with you because sometimes breathing can help us a lot when we're feeling these really big feelings. And so it's really challenging. And I know I said not to talk specifics, but I would encourage you. Again, I'd be happy to even take it offline with you if you have a specific situation or question about it, because I could probably tell you depending on the scenario, because in my mind, I'm thinking of all sorts of different situations of what you could want to be talking about. And it depends on, is it their meltdown? Is it somebody else's mental health? Is it, so there's a lot of different things at play here. And it's absolutely not a dumb question because it's one of those things, just like when we talk about development and how we put people into buckets, we know people don't fit into those buckets. The same thing with age appropriate. A lot of it has to do with how comfortable you are having a conversation, but honesty is always the best, short of giving away so much information that it is going to cause fear. And you know your children best. And so, it's difficult. I would need a little bit more specific to be able to give a more direct answer. But a lot of it does have to do with, if you're coming from that place of love, I would rather you be more transparent than withdrawing the information, if that makes sense.
Hey, Katie, if I can say just 2 cents, obviously I'm not an expert. The only reason I say this is because I tell my kids everything. Like I talk about everything with them, and my husband gets really upset with me. So my kid was the 5-year-old who understood where babies came from. He understood sex basically. And so it's kind of a little joke in our household that mom tells us that so much. But what I'll say to that is what someone told me was, if you're wondering if they know something or not, chances are they know way more than you think they know from the kids at school in general. So would you rather them hear things from you or from their friends at school who probably don't have all the facts and read something on the internet? Now, granted, I understand 4 is different, but so I always use that as a guide too, of like, they probably know more than I think, and do I want them hearing things from their friends versus me?
Thank you. That's helpful.
I couldn't agree more. I'm the same, Nancy. I have always been very honest with my son. And I will tell you, it has been very helpful at a lot of points. It's been hard at a lot of points too. I think that we are in a much different situation now than we used to be, where we shield our children from maybe more than our parents did or our grandparents did. I would rather he know, because again, if I'm talking about it, it's a safe space. And I'll just give you a quick example. One time, several years ago, he came home and he goes, this friend's bisexual, this friend's gay, this friend's bisexual, this friend's whatever. And I go, okay. I was like, what does that mean to you? And he's like, well, we like each other and blah, blah, blah. And, you're boyfriend, girlfriend. I go, okay. I go, do you know what sexuality is? And he didn't. And then when I very appropriately, with not too much information, explained what bisexual means with a boy and with a girl, he goes, oh, he did not know. So he learned a term and did not have the additional information. And then his brain was making up what that meant, and then was using it in a very, fluid way, which again, there's no worry about that. But when we're talking about mental health concepts, and if they only get like a part of it, they might be thinking about it a very different way. I've heard a lot of kids ask themselves, do I have ADHD? Do I have autism? Do I have depression? Do I have anxiety? Because they hear it everywhere. So the best thing to do is to have a conversation that this is what it can look like for you or for somebody else. And then that helps them know, like, it might not be, what's going on for me, but now I understand what's going on maybe for some others. There is one thing, I know we only have a minute left, but especially if you have young kids and they get overwhelmed and stressed, I'm going to teach you one technique. It's called the hand breathing. My son used to love this. There's hand breathing and belly breathing. Hand breathing is you breathe with them and you trace their finger. This is their hand. You trace their finger up and down. And as you're going up, they breathe in. And as they're going down, they breathe out. This teaches them deep breathing. And you do that on both hands twice. I did this with him before bed. It helped them learn how to deep breathe. Another way to do it is let them lay down on their back, put a stuffed animal on their tummy, and then they do the same thing in belly breathing. So when they breathe in, their bellies suck in, and then when they breathe out, their bellies grow and the stuffed animal pushes up on their belly. So they actually get to see the physical aspect of the deep breathing, and it helps them learn to calm themselves. And so then it's one of the ways that one of the tools that you can use if they're stressed.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm gonna try that today.
He still talks about it. We used to do this when he was very young. So he still talks about hand breathing.
There
That's a good
was one I heard somewhere else that was like blowing out candles. So
Yep.
like you hold up fingers and you say like how many candles, and then they have to blow out the candles, like, and like, oh, how much breath would you need to blow out 4 candles? Like
Yep.
if you try to get them to breathe longer. So
Make
any
it a
of those
game.
little thing, I feel like mixing it up though is good, because that one worked a few times, but he's kind of over it. So this might be good because it's new.
Yep. Make it a game. Make whatever you can a game. That's age appropriate too, but bringing in those mental health concepts and those kind of self-care concepts.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Hope I was a good stand-in for Mary Ellen.
Yes, we're so glad you could be here. And I'm going to stop the recording, and then, that's my video. I want to stop the recording.